For our next story, let's talk about another war. Not a war on ground, but a war against inflation. Global inflation seems to have turned a corner. Inflation rates are falling in the United States, in the UK, and also in the Eurozone. For central banks, it's a major relief. They still remain wary, but right now the economy is looking better. The question is, how did it happen? How did the world win this war against inflation? India's External Affairs Minister says the world has India to thank for it. Why? Our next report answers that question.
Yesterday, the UK came out with its inflation figures. They've been bad for quite some time, but yesterday was a welcome change. Why? Because inflation in the UK has dropped to 4.6%. That's the lowest in the last 2 years. But it's not just the UK that's witnessing falling inflation rates. There's the United States. Inflation has cooled off there too. In October, it's 3.2%. In the Eurozone, it was around 3%. So 3 major economies are all witnessing falling inflation rates. Does that mean that we've won the war against inflation? Well, not so soon. The central banks are happy, but not too much. They still remain wary. So how did global inflation turn a corner suddenly? Well, the reasons are many. Let's look at what drove the prices up. There was the COVID-19 pandemic, then the unprecedented stimulus by governments, and finally the Russia-Ukraine war. All of that affected the prices, and all of that drove up the prices. Which brings us to the central banks. They may be happy now, but they've been hawkish in the past 2 years, hiking interest rates to curb inflation. It might have been a divisive approach then, but it looks like it worked, even with the most stubborn inflation rates. But while global inflation rates cool off, India's External Affairs Minister had something to say. He says the world has India to thank for this. Here's why. Jaishankar says India bought oil from Russia despite sanctions. If it didn't, oil prices would be higher. New Delhi and Europe would be battling for the same suppliers, and all that would do is drive up the prices. So the world has India to thank for keeping oil prices steady.
Had we not bought oil from Russia, I think the global oil prices would have gone higher, because we would have gone into the same market, to the same suppliers that Europe would have done. And frankly, as we discovered, Europe would have outpriced us. And in fact, at least India was a big enough country to command some respect in the markets. But there were much smaller countries who didn't even get responses to their tender in Paris because the LNG suppliers were no longer interested in dealing with them. They had bigger fish to fry. So we've actually softened the oil markets and the gas markets through our purchase policies. We have, as a consequence, actually managed global inflation. So frankly, people should be saying thank you.
India is the third largest crude consumer after the United States and China. So if India didn't buy from Russia, it would drive up prices. Simple demand and supply. The more the demand, the less the supply, the higher the prices. And it wasn't just India. It was the whole of the global south. They protected their own interests, and that has made a whole lot of difference.